Hi, boys and girls. This is Ms. Kathy. I'm so happy you've joined me today for another story just for you. Have you ever been asked to be in a wedding? Maybe someone wanted you to be a junior bridesmaid or an usher. Maybe they wanted you to light the candles or spread flower petals. If you have, you know how crazy the wedding planning and rehearsals can be. That's what Maria finds out in this Shoebox Kids mystery. This time, Maria has a real problem. She's excited about being in her aunt's wedding, but everything is going wrong. Should she refuse to be a junior bridesmaid? Can you figure out what happened to Maria's missing dress before she does? Chapter 10. Call the police, quick! Chris stared at the open diaper bag. Suddenly, he was very serious. He didn't take your dress, Maria. He took Yo-Yo's doll clothes. Maria couldn't believe Chris. Even she knew what had happened now. Some detective you are, Chris, she said, rolling her eyes. But what did I say? Chris asked innocently. Can't you see what's in the bag? He's got all Yo-Yo's doll clothes. I'm sorry, but I have no idea how Yo-Yo's doll clothes found their way into our diaper bag, Dan said. By the way, my name is Pastor Hill. Chris's eyes got even bigger. Now he's trying to pretend he's Pastor Hill. We've got to call the police. Sammy shook his head sadly and put his hand on Chris's shoulder to keep him from running to a phone. Maria could tell that Sammy wanted to laugh. It appeared as though everyone but Chris knew what had happened. But if Chris didn't figure it out soon, she was afraid he really would call the police. Maria, are you in there? Is Pastor Hill in there? Mrs. Vargas asked from the doorway. Jenny moved from in front of the door, and she nudged Sammy and Chris out of the way, too, so Mrs. Vargas could come in. Mrs. Vargas looked puzzled. I'm glad I found you, Pastor Hill. Suddenly, she stopped talking when she thought to wonder why everyone was packed in the baby room. What are you doing in here, Maria? I was looking for my dress. But in here? Mrs. Vargas asked. Maria pointed. We thought he took my dress and hid it in the diaper bag. Maria knew what she said didn't sound very good. Moms always wanted explanations to sound reasonable. He said he was Pastor Hill, Mom, Chris announced. Maria rolled her eyes again. Jenny finally snickered, and Sammy looked like he was just about ready to give up. Mrs. Vargas smiled and sat down. Maybe I deserve an explanation about what is going on, she said. Maria? First of all, Maria knelt down. May I have your doll suitcase, Yo-Yo? She asked. Yo-Yo silently gave Maria her pink suitcase. Maria laid it on the floor and opened it. But, Chris stammered, but he couldn't finish his sentence. Maria held up her pink dress and gave it to her mom. Then she looked at Yo-Yo. Why did you take the dress, Yo-Yo? Yo-Yo wanted to cry, but she held it in. I didn't want you to have to wear the dress if you didn't want to. She sniffled and rubbed her eyes. So you took the dress and hid it so I wouldn't have to be in the wedding? Yo-Yo nodded. I'm sorry. I just wanted to be your best sister. Maria hugged Yo-Yo. You are my best sister, Yo-Yo. Now we should apologize for causing all this trouble. Maria stood up. I'm sorry for thinking you took my dress, Pastor Hill, Maria said. Pastor Hill smiled. Mrs. Hill smiled, and Maria thought their little baby was smiling too. Yo-Yo wiped her eyes and looked up at Pastor Hill. I'm sorry, she said. Finally, Maria turned to Chris. Have you figured it out yet? She could tell her brother was still puzzled. I guess so. Yo-Yo didn't think you would have to be in the wedding if you couldn't find your dress, so she took her doll clothes out of her little suitcase to make room for your dress. But she didn't have any place to put the doll clothes, so she stuffed them in the diaper bag, Chris said. Right, Maria said. What don't you understand? You still look confused. Chris sighed in exasperation. Why is everyone calling him Pastor Hill? Oh, Maria laughed. So you can't always solve a mystery, huh? So? Maria couldn't stop laughing. This Pastor Hill is our Pastor Hill's brother. Our Pastor Hill is sick and can't talk, so he asked his brother to take his place. That's what he was talking about on the phone when we overheard him. And he is the same man who called that day my dress came. Now it doesn't seem so strange that he said he was Pastor Hill when Pastor Hill was outside talking to Mom at the same time. Suddenly, Mrs. Vargas jumped up. Oh my, we better get you dressed, Maria. You had the most beautiful wedding in the world, Angie, Maria said at the reception. You were so beautiful. It all did turn out perfect, didn't it? Angie smiled. And I'm especially glad you found your dress. Maria shook Uncle Ben's hand, but before she went to get her juice and a piece of cake, she whispered in Angie's ear, Thank you for asking me to be in your wedding. Angie just smiled. "Maria, over here," Jenny called from a table in the corner. Balancing her cake and trying not to spill her juice, Maria made her way to the table. "It was just perfect," Jenny said. "Everything was beautiful, and so were you, Maria." Chris and Sammy rolled their eyes, but Maria could tell by their smiles that they thought it was a nice wedding, too. She blushed a little, then changed the subject so everyone would quit looking at her. "I'm sure glad we didn't call the police to arrest this Pastor Hill," she said to Jenny. "He's really nice, and that baby Tracy is so cute. Oh, Chris, Pastor Hill was looking for you." Chris chewed one edge of his lip. What did he want? Was he mad at me for calling him a thief? Maria shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he's just being friendly." Chris looked around nervously, then stood up. "I'm through eating. Come on, Sammy, let's go." "Go where?" Sammy asked through a mouthful of cake. "Just anywhere," Chris answered as he dragged his friend out of the room. "Do you think Pastor Hill is really mad?" Jenny whispered. Maria laughed. "No, I think he's going to ask Chris to help him take care of our Pastor Hill's yard this week. I was just playing a joke on Chris." They both stared as Chris and Sammy peeked around one edge of the doorway to the hall. As the boys ducked down to sneak away, Jenny giggled. "Poor Chris. I hope he figures it out before too long. Maria, your aunt had a beautiful wedding once the wedding part started. Before that, I thought it was going to be a disaster." Maria nodded. "It almost was. First, I didn't like the dress. Then I couldn't find the dress. Then Chris wanted to arrest the pastor. I never thought Yo-Yo would do something like that just to help me." "I'm just glad it's all over," Jenny said. "Who knows what will happen next around here?" "You never know," Maria agreed with a shake of her head. "You never know."
The story you have heard today is a chapter of the Shoebox Kids, Book 6, The Wedding Dress Disaster, written by Eric Stoffel, edited and created by Jerry D. Thomas, and used with permission from the Pacific Press Publishing Association. If you're interested in any other books published by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, please visit AdventistBookCenter.com or call 1-800-765-6955.
This podcast is a production of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.